I'm Tracy Roberson, and I will be helping you assemble your straightforward today. Here are the tools necessary in order to assemble your straightforward. A box cutter in order to get the boxes open and also the bundles, and then some 1/2-inch wrenches. It would be nice if one of the wrenches had an extension. As you can see, I've already removed the rails from the box. I'm now going to carefully cut them apart using a box cutter. I want to be sure not to scratch the paint when I cut them apart. Since I will be assembling a 2-tier today, there are 4 total rails. 2 of the rails just have holes drilled in them. These are going to be your tops, and you can set them aside. The other 2 rails have what we call weld tabs. Specifically, we're looking for the rail that has the raised bump, as you can see here. This is going to be the rear rail that sits on the floor. So let's start there. I've taken the rail that has the raised bump and put it in the back of the rack. The other rail that has the weld tabs on it without a raised bump is going to go in the front. Because this rack is angled, I'm setting it up like a parallelogram. The way that I'm going to set this rack up is a right angle so that it will show the drivetrain of the bikes. I've now taken the floor supports and I have put them in between the rear rail and the front rail. You'll notice on the rail that there is a through hole in which a bolt is going to go through and connect to the floor support. If you have the rack laid out in the orientation that you want, either right or left angled, and your holes are not lining up, what you're going to want to do is take the rail and flip it end over end, and then your holes will line up. Our rails are drilled so that you can set it up either right angled or left angled. I've located my 5/16 by 2-inch bolts. This is the size that's going to connect the front rail to the floor supports. It's really important that we just finger tighten these and that we don't tighten them all the way down. So just put them into place to hold all the parts together. As you can see, I have my super tray assembled. If you do not have your super trays assembled yet, please see our super tray assembly video. I have in my hands the straightforward slide spacers. One of these is going to go on the rear of the rack over the weld, and one on the front rail over the weld. You're going to want to put them at an angle because we're going to be putting the super tray on top of them. The super tray has a hole in the rear and one in the front. These holes are going to line up with the rear rail and the front rail. Again, if for some reason your tray is not lining up, take a look at your rails. They may need to be flipped. I'm going to be attaching the super tray to the structure of the straightforward using a 5/16 by 3-inch bolt and a 5/16 inch washer. I'm going to put the washer over the bolt before inserting it into the back hole. You'll want to tighten down with your 5/16 inch wrench, preferably the one with the extension. Continue attaching your straightforward spacers and your trays to the rack until your entire bottom tier is complete. Now that all the trays have been attached to the structure, we're going to want to go through and tighten the front rail to the floor support and also tighten the rear rail to the floor support. This will be the final step in completing the ground level of your straightforward. Next, you'll want to locate your vertical posts. I have a 57 and a 61-inch vertical post because I'm setting up a 2-tier rack. The larger vertical post, the 61, is going to go in the rear of the rack in these floor supports. The 57 is going to go in the front of the floor support because the rack slopes down. Alright, we're going to put the 57 in the front of this floor support, and we're going to put the 61 in the back. Finally, we're going to put this 61-inch vertical post into the center floor support. And then we're going to tighten them all down. Locate your 5/16 by 1/2-inch bolts. This is what you're going to use to tighten down the vertical posts. I'm going to go ahead and get started in tightening all of these down. If you purchased a 3-tier straightforward rack, these rear vertical posts would be 79 inches and the front would be 75, but the process is exactly the same. Let's get started on building the 2nd tier. It's now time to locate your upper main arms. This is an upper main arm end. It's got the additional welded piece. And this is an upper main arm center. You'll have 2 ends and 1 center. Again, if you're setting up a rack that only has 4 bikes per tier or 5 bikes per tier, you will not have a center support. But since we're setting up a 6 bike per tier rack, we are going to need the center support. I have the straightforward upper main arm end in my hand, and I'm going to slide it over the vertical posts. I find it easiest at this step to just make sure that the back is flush with the top of the 61-inch vertical post. We can always adjust the height later on. Once you get this slid into place, use the 5/16 by 1/2 inch bolts just a finger tight to make sure that this piece doesn't fall. I have the upper main arm center in my hand. I'm going to slide that over this vertical post. Again, I'm going to go until I'm flush with the vertical post, and then I'm going to use the 5/16 by 1/2 inch bolts just to finger tighten so it doesn't fall down. This is the last straightforward main arm end. I'm again going to slide it over the vertical posts, making sure that I'm flush in the back, and then tighten with 5/16 by 1/2 inch bolts. All right, it's time to find the top rails that I told you to put aside earlier in the video. Remember, all of our top rails are drilled so that the rack can be set up left-angled or right-angled. Because of the way the top rails are drilled, there isn't one specific rail for the front or the back. So feel free to just grab one rail, and we're going to start putting the second tier together. The best way to get the front top rail aligned is unfortunately with trial and error. So what I'm going to do is just look at where the bottom rail is and try to make sure that the top rail is a mirror image of the bottom rail. If for some reason my hole placement isn't working out, again, take the rail and flip it end over end. Once you have your front rail as a mirror image of your bottom rail, you'll notice that these upper main arms have through holes in the front. You're going to want to make sure that the holes on your top rail line up, and you're going to take a 5/16 by 3 inch bolt, go through the top rail, through the main arm, and put a stop nut on the bottom. You'll want to repeat this step on all of the upper main arms. We're going to take the last rail and we're going to slide it through the back of the upper main arms. Now keep in mind we want to look at the hole placement and make sure that it's a mirror image of the floor. Once the back rail is in place and all of the holes line up and make a mirror image of the bottom rail, you're going to want to put 5/16 by 1/2 inch bolts in the back to hold the rail in place. And I'm also going to go through and tighten all of the upper main arms. We're now ready to attach the trays to the second tier of the structure. You'll need to find your straightforward slides. You're going to put one on the front rail over the hole and one on the back rail. Be sure to put them at an angle. Now carefully attach the tray to the straightforward slides. You'll attach the tray through the slide and the rail using a 5/16 by 2.5 inch bolt with a washer and then a 5/16 inch stop nut on the bottom. Once you have all of the trays on the rack, you're going to want to go back through and make sure that all of the hardware is tightened down before loading any bikes on the rack. Now that your rack is set up and everything is tightened down, you want to go through and put plugs into all of the exposed ends. Alright, if you have a 3-tier rack, now would be the point when you would add the 48-inch third-tier extensions to the back of your vertical posts and build your third tier. If you have a 2-tier rack, congratulations, you're done. It's time to start loading the bikes. If you have any questions or problems while setting up your rack, please feel free to email or call us at the email address or the phone number below.